I'm Abigail Mitchell, 23, and this morning I woke up shivering in my Honda Civic, my breath visible in the January air. For 6 months, this car has been my home while juggling 2 jobs and a full course load. I was brushing my teeth using a water bottle when a gleaming Mercedes pulled alongside me. The window lowered, revealing my grandfather's shocked face. "Abby? What the hell are you doing?" The shame burned hotter than my portable heater ever could. What he did next would expose the darkest secret my family had been hiding from me for years. Before I continue my story, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments, hit that like button, and subscribe to join our community of survivors and thrivers. Trust me, you'll want to stick around for what happens next. My family never saw it coming. I grew up in a comfortable middle-class home in Connecticut. Nothing extravagant, but we never struggled. At least not until my parents divorced when I was 16. My mom, Karen, had always been somewhat materialistic, but my dad balanced her out. They fought constantly about money, which ultimately led to their separation. My relationship with my grandfather, Richard Mitchell, was always special. A self-made real estate developer, Grandpa Richard, had built his fortune from nothing. He was tough but fair, and for some reason, he always seemed to favor me among his grandchildren. He taught me to change a tire when I was 12, took me fishing on weekends, and never missed a single school play. My mother always seemed slightly jealous of our bond. After the divorce, everything changed. Mom remarried within a year to Douglas Hartman, a charming financial advisor with slick hair and an even slicker personality. Douglas had a daughter, Heather, who was 19 now, just 4 years younger than me. From day one, Douglas made it clear that Heather was the priority in their new blended family. She got the larger bedroom, a new car for her 16th birthday, and constant praise for even her smallest achievements. I tried to adapt. I really did. But Douglas always found ways to criticize me. My grades weren't perfect enough. My part-time job at the local library wasn't impressive enough. My friends weren't from the right families. Mom, desperate to make her new marriage work, gradually stopped defending me. When I got accepted to Westlake University to study computer science, I expected my family to help with tuition as they'd always promised. Instead, the excuses began. "Business is slow right now," Douglas would say, despite the new boat in their driveway. "We've had some unexpected expenses," Mom would explain, while showing off her new designer handbag. At first, they provided minimal help. Enough for my first semester's books and a small portion of tuition. By the beginning of my second year, the support had completely disappeared. "You're an adult now, Abby," Mom told me over the phone. "You need to learn financial independence." Meanwhile, they paid for Heather's full ride at a private liberal arts college, complete with a luxury apartment and spending money. When I questioned this disparity, Douglas coldly informed me that Heather was their daughter, the implication being that I was not. I was too proud to ask Grandpa Richard for help. He and Douglas had never gotten along, and I didn't want to create more family drama. Besides, Grandpa had his own life, traveling frequently and managing his business. We still met for lunch occasionally, but I carefully avoided any mention of my financial struggles. So I adapted. I took out student loans. I picked up a morning shift at Maggie's Diner and evening hours at Barnes & Noble bookstore. I maintained a full course load, studying in every spare moment. When my apartment lease ended and the rent increased beyond what I could afford, I started sleeping in my car. I showered at the campus gym, stored my few possessions in a small locker, and pretended everything was fine. For 6 months, I managed this precarious balance. My grades remained strong. I couldn't afford to lose my partial academic scholarship. My coworkers thought I was just an ambitious student. No one knew I was homeless. Until that morning when Grandpa Richard, who decided to surprise me with breakfast before my early class, found me brushing my teeth in a parking lot. The look on his face, confusion, shock, then a dawning anger that wasn't directed at me, told me everything was about to change. "Get in," Grandpa Richard said, his voice leaving no room for argument. I gathered my toothbrush and water bottle, embarrassment washing over me in waves as I slid into his Mercedes. The leather seats felt impossibly soft after months of sleeping upright in my Honda. How long? He asked, his knuckles white against the steering wheel. 6 months, I admitted, studying my worn sneakers. And your mother knows about this? I shook my head. I haven't really spoken to Mom or Douglas much lately. They're busy with Heather's sorority events and Douglas's golf tournaments. Grandpa's jaw tightened. So while you're homeless, they're playing country club? It's not that bad, I lied. I'm managing. My scholarship covers most tuition. And my jobs pay for food and gas. I'm fine. You're sleeping in a car in winter, Abigail. That's not fine by any definition. His voice softened. Why didn't you come to me? The question broke something inside me. I didn't want to be a burden. Everyone has their own problems, and I thought I could handle it myself. Grandpa pulled into a diner. Not Maggie's where I worked, thankfully, and ordered us both breakfast. Over pancakes that I devoured embarrassingly quickly, he extracted the full story. My growing isolation from Mom and Douglas. The gradual withdrawal of support. The excuses. The favoritism toward Heather. The increasing struggle to balance work and school. This ends today, he said firmly. You're moving into my guest house. Grandpa. I can't. You can and you will. It's sitting empty, has its own entrance, and is 10 minutes from campus. And before you talk about pride, let me remind you that I worked 3 jobs when I was younger than you. There's no pride in suffering unnecessarily when help is available. His logic was irrefutable. But fear still gnawed at me. Mom and Douglas will be upset. They'll say, I'm trying to turn you against them. Let me worry about your mother and that husband of hers. Something in his tone made me look up. There was anger there, but also calculation. Something's not adding up, Abby. Karen knows your grandmother, and I set money aside for all our grandchildren's education. This was news to me. What money? He waved dismissively. We'll get to that. First, let's get you settled. That afternoon, I followed Grandpa's car to his property, a beautiful colonial on 3 acres in the affluent part of town. The guest house was practically a small home itself, with a bedroom, bathroom, kitchenette, and sitting area. Clean, comfortable, and, most importantly, warm. The fridge is stocked, but we'll go shopping for whatever else you need, he said. The Wi-Fi password is on the counter, and here's a key to the main house if you need anything. I stood in the middle of the space, overwhelmed. I don't know how to thank you. You don't need to thank me, you're my granddaughter. He hesitated. Abby, I need to make some calls. Why don't you get some rest? You look exhausted. I couldn't argue with that assessment. After he left, I took the longest, hottest shower of my life, put on clean clothes, and collapsed onto the bed. I slept for 14 hours straight. When I woke, I found a note from Grandpa saying he'd called both my jobs to explain I had a family emergency and would be back in a few days. I felt a twinge of panic. I couldn't afford to lose those jobs, but the overwhelming relief of sleeping in a real bed outweighed it. Over the next few days, Grandpa was often on the phone, his voice occasionally rising enough for me to catch fragments. Legal obligations, breach of trust, fiduciary responsibility. One afternoon, I clearly heard him say, I don't care what excuses they've given you, Harrison. They've been receiving money from the trust fund for years. Where has it gone? Trust fund? The phrase echoed in my mind, raising questions I wasn't sure I wanted answered. On my 3rd day in the guest house, Grandpa invited me to dinner in the main house. And, he added, too casually, I've invited your mother and Douglas as well. And Heather. My stomach dropped. Is that necessary? Things are already uncomfortable between us. It's very necessary, he replied, his expression unreadable. There are matters that need to be addressed face to face. I spent the rest of the day anxious about the dinner. When evening came, I dressed carefully in the nicest clothes I had, which weren't very nice at all after months of living minimally. At precisely 6 o'clock, I heard cars pulling into the driveway. The family dinner from hell was about to begin. I waited until I heard voices in the main house before leaving the guest house. My stomach was in knots as I walked across the manicured lawn, watching shadows move behind the dining room curtains. I considered turning around and hiding in the guest house, but I knew this confrontation was inevitable. The housekeeper, Maria, opened the door before I could knock. Your grandfather is in the dining room with your family, she said, giving my shoulder a supportive squeeze. Maria had known me since childhood and had always been kind. I found everyone already seated at Grandpa's formal dining table. Mom looked nervous, fidgeting with her napkin. Douglas maintained his usual confident facade, though his eyes darted to Grandpa more often than necessary. Heather was scrolling through her phone, clearly bored. "Abby!" Mom stood, moving to hug me, but I stepped back instinctively. Hurt flashed across her face before she composed herself. "We've been worried about you. You haven't been returning my calls." "Funny time to start worrying," I said before I could stop myself. Abigail Douglas said with forced joviality, "Your mother and I were just telling Richard about Heather's amazing internship opportunity this summer. A congressional office. The networking potential is extraordinary. Grandpa didn't even pretend interest." "Sit down, Abby. Maria has prepared a wonderful meal." The first course was served in awkward silence. I could feel Heather studying me, a small smirk playing on her lips. She was probably wondering why I was there, in my cheap clothes, disrupting their usual performance for Grandpa. After the soup plates were cleared, Grandpa set down his wineglass with deliberate care. "I think it's time we discuss why I called this family meeting." Douglas leaned forward eagerly. "If it's about that property development in Nashville, I've been doing some research." "It's about Abby," Grandpa interrupted coldly. "Specifically, about how I found her living in her car 3 days ago." The silence that followed was deafening. Mom's face drained of color. Douglas froze with his wineglass halfway to his mouth. "Living in her car?" Mom finally repeated. "That can't be right. Abby, why would you do something so drastic?" Before I could answer, Grandpa continued. "She's been homeless for 6 months, working 2 jobs while maintaining a full course load. Apparently, her family decided she wasn't worth supporting anymore." Douglas set down his glass carefully. "Richard, with all due respect, you don't have all the facts. We've had significant financial setbacks this year. We simply couldn't afford." "Interesting," Grandpa cut in, "because according to my records, you've received $4,000 every month, specifically earmarked for Abby's education and living expenses." I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. "What?" Mom at least had the decency to look ashamed. Heather suddenly seemed very interested in her water glass. "I don't understand," I said, looking between them. "What money?" Grandpa placed his hand over mine. "When your grandmother passed, we set up trust funds for all our grandchildren. Your parents were appointed as trustees for your fund until you turned 25. They've been receiving monthly distributions for your education for the past 5 years." Douglas cleared his throat. "Now, Richard, that arrangement was always somewhat flexible." "It was not flexible." Grandpa's fist hit the table, making the silverware jump. The terms were explicitly clear. That money was for Abby's education and welfare, not for your boat or Karen's shopping addiction. Mom burst into tears. "We've been struggling, Dad. Douglas's business had some setbacks, and we needed to maintain certain appearances." "Appearances?" I echoed, finding my voice. "I've been sleeping in my car. I've been showering at the campus gym and keeping my clothes in a locker." "You should have come to us if you were having problems," Douglas said, attempting to regain control of the narrative. "We would have helped." "I did come to you." The memories of those humiliating conversations flooded back. "I called and texted for weeks when my rent went up. You said I needed to figure it out myself and develop financial responsibility." Heather finally spoke, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. "No one forced you to attend such an expensive university, Abby. Maybe if you'd chosen something more reasonable, like community college, like the private university you attend," I shot back. "The one with the luxury apartment Douglas pays for?" "That's different," Douglas said dismissively. "Heather has specific needs and opportunities." "Enough!" Grandpa thundered. "I've heard all I need to hear. Karen, I'm beyond disappointed in you. Your own daughter was homeless while you spent her education money on what exactly? New furniture? Vacations? Heather's needs?" Mom sobbed harder, burying her face in her hands. Douglas placed a protective arm around her shoulders. "It's more complicated than that, Richard. We've had investments that didn't pay off. Medical expenses you don't know about. Save it for the audit, Grandpa replied coldly. I've already spoken with Harrison. As the original grantor of the trust, I'm exercising my right to remove you both as trustees due to breach of fiduciary duty. Douglas's facade finally cracked. You can't do that. We have rights. You had responsibilities that you failed spectacularly to fulfill. Grandpa stood, signaling the dinner was over. From now on, Abby's trust will be managed by Harrison's firm until she turns 25. And I'll be reviewing all distributions from both Heather's and Timothy's trusts as well. Timothy was my cousin, Aunt Beth's son. Dad, please, Mom begged, mascara streaking her cheeks. We can fix this. We'll help Abby now, of course we will. We didn't realize how bad things had gotten. The last of my respect for my mother crumbled as I watched her performance. She wasn't sorry for what she'd done, only that she'd been caught. I think it's best if you leave, Grandpa said quietly. Abby will be staying in the guest house until other arrangements can be made. Douglas stood, pulling Mom up with him. This isn't over, Richard. We had an understanding about those funds. Your understanding was wrong, Grandpa replied simply. Good night. Heather flounced past me, whispering just loud enough for me to hear. Enjoy it while it lasts, little orphan Annie. You have no idea what you've started. After they left, I collapsed into my chair, emotionally drained. I had no idea about any trust fund. Grandpa sighed heavily. Your grandmother wanted to ensure all our grandchildren could pursue higher education without financial stress. Your mother and Douglas were supposed to use that money for you, not themselves. I felt numb. All those months of struggling, of skipping meals to save money, of sleeping in a freezing car, all while my family had money specifically meant for me. What happens now? I asked. Now, Grandpa said, we get to the bottom of exactly what they've been doing with your money, and we make sure they can never touch it again. The next morning, Grandpa drove us to a sleek downtown office building. Harrison Wells, the family lawyer, was waiting for us in a conference room with stacks of documents spread across the table. He was in his 60s with silver hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He'd handled my grandparents' legal affairs for decades. Abigail. He greeted me warmly. I wish we were meeting again under better circumstances. So do I replied, eyeing the paperwork. Is all that about my trust fund? Harrison nodded grimly. I've pulled everything related to the Mitchell Family Educational Trust. Richard asked me to prepare a comprehensive overview. For the next hour, Harrison walked me through the details of the trust my grandmother had established before her death 7 years ago. It was substantial. Enough to cover tuition at any university in the country, plus living expenses, for all 4 of my grandparents' grandchildren. The distributions were structured to begin when each grandchild turned 18 or began higher education, whichever came first, Harrison explained. In your case, the first distributions began shortly after your high school graduation. I never saw any of that money, I said, because it was paid directly to your trustees, your mother and stepfather. They were legally obligated to use it exclusively for your education and related living expenses. He slid several documents toward me. Monthly statements showing transfers of $4,000 from the trust to an account in my mother and Douglas's names. Tuition payments that should have been made directly to Westlake University but had somehow been rerouted. Housing allowances that never reached me. This is the original trust document with your grandmother's signature, Harrison continued, showing me another paper. And this is an amendment filed 3 years ago, purportedly with your signature, giving your trustees more discretion over fund distributions. I stared at the signature. That's not my handwriting. I didn't think so, Harrison said grimly. That's forgery, Abigail. A serious criminal offense. The room seemed to spin. I thought back to all those times when Mom or Douglas had asked me to sign random documents, insurance forms, tax papers, without really explaining what they were. Had they been practicing my signature? How much? I finally asked. How much have they taken? Harrison and Grandpa exchanged a look. Based on our preliminary analysis, Harrison said carefully, approximately $230,000 over the past 5 years. The number was staggering. That was money that should have paid for my education, my housing, my books, my meals. Instead, it had vanished into my parents' lifestyle. "There's more," Grandpa said gently. "Harrison has traced some of the larger withdrawals." The lawyer nodded. "We found evidence of your trust money being used to pay for Heather's tuition, a down payment on a boat, several luxury vacations, and renovations to their home." Suddenly, fragments of conversations made horrible sense. Douglas's cryptic comments about your grandmother taking care of things. Mom's insistence that I not discuss financial matters with Grandpa. The strange paperwork I'd signed without reading carefully. All the pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. "Is that why they didn't want me talking to you?" I asked Grandpa. "They were afraid you'd find out?" He nodded grimly. "I suspect so. They've been very careful to keep you and me from having detailed conversations about your education finances." "What happens now?" I asked. "You have options," Harrison explained. "We can pursue criminal charges for the forgery and misappropriation of funds. Or we can handle this as a civil matter, demanding repayment without involving law enforcement." "I don't know if I can send my own mother to jail," I whispered, the reality of the situation hitting me fully. "You don't need to decide today," Grandpa assured me. "But there will be immediate changes regardless. Harrison has already filed paperwork to remove them as trustees. I'll temporarily take over until you're 25, or we can appoint an independent trustee if you prefer." "I trust you, Grandpa," I said without hesitation. As we left Harrison's office, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You think you're so clever getting Grandpa involved? You have no idea what you've done. Back off now or you'll regret it." I showed the message to Grandpa, who immediately called Harrison. "We should document any threats," he said grimly. "This is only going to get uglier before it gets better." On the drive home, I stared out the window, thinking about all the needless suffering I'd endured, while my family lived comfortably on money meant for me. The betrayal cut deeper than I could have imagined. "I keep thinking about all those nights in my car," I said quietly. "I was so cold, so scared sometimes. And they knew. They knew there was money for me, and they just kept it." Grandpa reached over and squeezed my hand. "We're going to make this right, Abby. I promise you that." I nodded. But the sick feeling in my stomach wouldn't go away. My family hadn't just failed to help me. They had actively stolen from me, leaving me homeless while they enjoyed the fruits of my trust fund. And based on that text message, they weren't planning to give up without a fight. After the revelations about the trust fund, I tried to focus on school and adjust to my new living situation. Grandpa had insisted I cut back my work hours to concentrate on my education, now that proper financial support was in place. I kept my job at the bookstore but left the diner, giving me precious time to catch up on coursework. The guest house became a sanctuary. For the first time in months, I could sleep deeply without fear, take hot showers whenever I wanted, and study at a proper desk instead of in my car or noisy campus lounges. The simple luxuries of normal life, a refrigerator, laundry facilities, a comfortable bed, felt miraculous after my time being homeless. I was leaving the computer science building one afternoon when I spotted Heather leaning against my car. My stomach tightened as I approached. "What are you doing here?" I asked, keeping my distance. She gave me a wide, false smile. "Can't I visit my stepsister? We're family, after all. You made it pretty clear at dinner how you feel about me." Heather's smile didn't waver. "I was upset. We all were. Finding out you've been living in your car? It was shocking, Abby. Mom's been crying for days." I unlocked my car, wary of her sudden friendliness. "If she's upset, she can call me herself. She's afraid you won't talk to her. That's why I'm here." Heather stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Look, I know things have been messed up, but you're going nuclear by getting lawyers involved. I'm not the one who forged signatures and stole money," I pointed out. "It's more complicated than that." Her voice took on an earnest quality I'd never heard before. "Dad's business has been struggling. They borrowed from your fund thinking they could replace it before you needed it. I did need it. I was living in my car, Heather." She had the grace to look slightly ashamed. I didn't know how bad it was. Honestly, she touched my arm. "But Abby, if you push this legal thing, it could destroy the whole family. Dad could go to jail. Is that what you want?" The manipulation was so transparent it was almost insulting. What I want is for everyone to stop lying to me. We can fix this, she insisted. Mom and Dad are willing to work out a payment plan. They'll make it right. But if you let Grandpa and his lawyer push for criminal charges, she let the threat hang in the air. I haven't decided anything yet. Well, decide carefully. Her friendly facade slipped for a moment. Because things will get worse for everyone if you don't back off. Mom and Dad aren't the only ones with secrets, you know. She smiled again, all sweetness. Think about it, sis. She walked away, leaving me unsettled. It was clearly a threat, but I wasn't sure exactly what she meant. What other secrets could there be? 2 days later, I discovered exactly how serious they were about making things worse. I was giving a major presentation in my advanced database systems class. A project worth 30% of my grade that I'd spent weeks preparing. When I connected my laptop to the projector, instead of my carefully created slides, pornographic images filled the screen. Gasps and snickers erupted from the class. I frantically tried to close the presentation, my face burning with humiliation, but my computer was suddenly unresponsive. Miss Mitchell. Professor Winters looked shocked and angry. What is the meaning of this? This isn't. Someone must have tampered with my presentation, I stammered, finally managing to force quit the program. My office. Immediately after class, she said coldly. In her office, Professor Winters informed me that not only was the prank completely inappropriate, but she had received an anonymous email that morning with evidence that my entire project had been plagiarized. I didn't plagiarize anything, I protested. I wrote every line of code myself. You can check the development history. The evidence is quite compelling, she replied, showing me side-by-side comparisons of my work and code allegedly stolen from various sources. This is grounds for academic probation, possibly expulsion. I'll have to report this to the Academic Integrity Committee. I left her office in a daze, my scholarship and academic future suddenly in jeopardy. This was no coincidence. It had to be connected to Heather's warning. Desperate, I reached out to Jasmine Chen, a classmate who had been working on a similar project. Someone's trying to frame me for plagiarism, I explained when we met at the campus coffee shop, and I think they hacked my presentation too. Jasmine, a brilliant programmer with a focus on cybersecurity, examined my laptop. Your system was definitely compromised. There's a remote access tool installed that shouldn't be here. Can you trace it? Not easily, but I can help you prove you didn't plagiarize. She thought for a moment. Didn't you say your stepsister goes here too? What's her major? Communications. Why? Does she have friends in the computer science department? I thought about it. I think her roommate is dating a CS major. Brendan something. Jasmine's eyes widened. Brendan Walsh? He's in our class. A quick search of Heather's social media confirmed it. There were photos of her with Brendan at parties. He would have had both the knowledge to hack my laptop and access to the classroom before my presentation. Working together, Jasmine and I documented the unique development process of my project, gathering timestamp evidence from cloud backups and early drafts that proved I'd created the work independently over several weeks. We also found traces of the remote access that had been used to alter my presentation and plant the plagiarized material. Professor Winters was skeptical at first but ultimately convinced by our evidence. The academic integrity investigation was dropped, though the incident would remain a cloud over my reputation with some faculty members. When I returned to the guest house that evening, I found Grandpa waiting with a security contractor. Someone tried to break in today, he said gravely. Maria saw them and called the police, but they got away. The security expert showed us where a window had been jimmied. They were interrupted before they could get in, he explained. But I'd recommend upgrading the security system immediately. By nightfall, the guest house had new locks, security cameras, and an alarm system. I sat on the couch, trembling with a mixture of fear and rage. This was escalating far beyond what I had imagined. They weren't just threatening me, they were actively trying to destroy my life. They're not going to stop, are they? I asked Grandpa as he brought me tea. People who steal from their own daughter rarely have moral boundaries, he said grimly. But neither do I when it comes to protecting my family. Tomorrow, we're meeting with Harrison again. And this time, we're going to discuss criminal charges. I nodded, resolve hardening within me. The time for mercy had passed. The following week, my mother called, her voice tearful and contrite. "Abby, please. We need to talk, just you and me." Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet her for lunch at a cafe downtown. Grandpa insisted his driver take me and wait outside. He didn't trust Douglas not to be involved somehow. Mom was already seated when I arrived, looking thinner than I remembered. She rose to hug me, and I allowed it stiffly. "You look good," she said as we sat down. "Living with your grandfather agrees with you." "Having a roof over my head agrees with me," I replied. She winced. "I deserve that. Abby, what happened?" "It's inexcusable, I know that." "Do you?" "Because forging my signature and stealing $250,000 seems pretty deliberate." "It didn't start that way," she insisted, tears welling. "When your grandmother set up those trusts, we were supposed to be the administrators until you kids were older. At first, we only borrowed a little to cover some unexpected expenses. We always meant to pay it back before you needed it for college. And then Douglas's investment firm had some setbacks. We needed to maintain appearances for his clients. If people thought we were struggling financially, he'd lose business entirely." She dabbed at her eyes. It spiraled from there. One small withdrawal became another and another. "That doesn't explain why you let me become homeless, Mom. You knew I was struggling. I called you begging for help." Her eyes dropped. I was ashamed. By then, we'd taken so much. We couldn't admit what we'd done. And Douglas insisted that you needed to learn independence. While Heather got everything handed to her, Heather is different. She needs more support. I laughed bitterly. "You mean she throws bigger tantrums when she doesn't get her way?" Mom reached for my hand. I pulled back. "Abby, please. I'm trying to make this right. Douglas and I have discussed it, and we're willing to set up a payment plan. We'll return everything, I promise." Something about her eagerness felt off. "Why now?" "You weren't concerned about making things right when I was sleeping in my car." "Because we're family," she insisted. "And because, well, a criminal record would destroy Douglas's career. And our reputation. Please, Abby. For my sake, if not for his." I studied her face, finally seeing the truth. "You're not sorry you took the money. You're sorry you got caught." "That's not true. I love you, Abby. I always have. Just not enough to make sure I had a place to live." I stood up. "I need time to think, Mom." "Wait." She grabbed my arm. "Your grandfather. Has he mentioned changing his will recently? Or restructuring the family trusts?" And there it was. The real reason for this meeting. Not reconciliation, but reconnaissance. "Goodbye, Mom." As I walked away, I noticed her surreptitiously slip her phone back into her purse. Had she been recording our conversation? My suspicion was confirmed later that day when Jasmine helped me check my own phone and discovered spyware had been installed. Likely when Mom had hugged me. The software would have given them access to my microphone, camera, and text messages. The next blow came from an unexpected direction. I was working my shift at the bookstore when a man in an expensive suit approached the counter. "Abigail Mitchell?" "Yes." "I'm Walter Green. I'm a business partner of Douglas Hartman." He glanced around to ensure no one was listening. "I need to warn you. Douglas is desperate. The firm is in much worse shape than anyone knows, and he's been using client funds to cover personal expenses for years." I stared at him, stunned. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because he's planning something that could hurt a lot of people, including your grandfather." Walter slid an envelope across the counter. "This contains documents showing transfers from your trust to various shell companies Douglas controls. There's also evidence he's approached Richard's business rivals with inside information." I took the envelope cautiously. "Why would you betray your partner like this?" Walter's expression hardened. "Because he betrayed me first. Just be careful. Douglas isn't the man most people think he is." The documents confirmed what Walter had said. Douglas had been systematically looting not just my trust fund but several client accounts as well. He was on the verge of financial collapse and was growing increasingly desperate. That desperation became violently clear 2 days later when Grandpa called me from the hospital. He had fallen down his stairs at home, sustaining a concussion and a broken wrist. "It wasn't an accident," he told me when I rushed to his bedside. "Someone had waxed the top 3 steps. Maria found residue after the paramedics took me away." Detective Michael Reynolds took our statement, his expression grave as we explained the family conflict and recent events. "This has escalated beyond harassment into attempted murder," he said. "The fall could have killed a man Mr. Mitchell's age." "It's my fault," I said miserably. "If I hadn't gotten Grandpa involved." "None of this is your fault," Detective Reynolds interrupted firmly. "Your family has been committing serious crimes. You're the victim here, not them." Grandpa was released the next day with orders to rest. I moved temporarily into the main house to help care for him, worried sick that my family's retaliation would continue. My concern was justified when I discovered surveillance photos of myself in Douglas and Mom's house. Someone had been following me, documenting my movements. The photos had been uploaded to a shared cloud account that Jasmine managed to access through Mom's carelessly secured email. The final straw came when the dean's office contacted me about a complaint filed against my scholarship. Someone had submitted evidence that I had lied about my financial need, including doctored bank statements showing large deposits to an account in my name. My carefully constructed support system began to form. Professor Bennett from the computer science department, impressed by how I'd handled the plagiarism accusation, advocated for me with the administration. Jasmine's technical evidence helped prove the bank statements were forgeries. Detective Reynolds documented each incident, building a case. Harrison Wells provided legal guidance every step of the way. Through Grandpa's business contacts, we learned that Douglas had been approaching Grandpa's competitors, offering insider information in exchange for financial bailouts. His investment firm was under secret investigation by the Securities and Exchange Commission. Their entire life was a house of cards on the verge of collapse. Heather confronted me on campus, her previous facade of friendliness gone. "You've ruined everything," she hissed. "Dad's business is failing because of you. Mom barely gets out of bed." "I didn't do any of this," I replied calmly. "Your parents stole from me, not the other way around." "They're desperate," she admitted, her voice breaking. "Dad's firm is about to go under. All his clients are pulling their money out. We might lose the house. And that justifies trying to sabotage my education? Breaking into Grandpa's house? Pushing him down the stairs?" Her expression flickered with genuine shock at the last accusation. "What?" "No one pushed him. Dad said he fell. Someone waxed the stairs." "Heather, that's crazy." "Dad wouldn't." But uncertainty crept into her voice. "He's been acting weird lately. Staying up all night. Drinking more than usual. Mom's afraid of him sometimes." For the first time, I felt a flicker of sympathy for her. Heather had been as manipulated as I had, just in different ways. "It's going to get worse before it gets better," I told her honestly. "There's an SEC investigation. Criminal charges are coming. They're saying Grandpa's going senile," she blurted out. "Dad found a doctor who will testify that he's not competent to manage his affairs. They're going to court next week to try to get guardianship." Ice ran through my veins. If they succeeded in having Grandpa declared incompetent, they could gain control of his assets and undo everything we'd accomplished. "Why are you telling me this?" She looked away. "Because I found Mom researching untraceable poisons last night. I think they might be planning something even worse." Heather's warning sent me into a panic. I rushed home to tell Grandpa about their plan to have him declared incompetent, but found him already meeting with Harrison in the study. "They've filed the paperwork this morning," Harrison confirmed grimly, showing us legal documents. "They're claiming Richard has shown signs of cognitive decline and is being unduly influenced by you, Abigail." "That's ridiculous," Grandpa snorted. "I've never been sharper." "Nevertheless, we'll need to respond aggressively," Harrison said. "I've arranged for an independent neurological evaluation to establish your competence. We should also document the timing of this filing, immediately after you discovered their financial malfeasance." I hesitated, then shared what Heather had told me about the poison research. Detective Reynolds was called immediately. "We can't arrest someone for Google searches," he explained when he arrived. "But given the pattern of escalation, I'm concerned. Miss Mitchell, I strongly recommend you avoid eating or drinking anything that hasn't been prepared by someone you trust completely." They're getting desperate, I said. Heather mentioned an SEC investigation. Harrison nodded. Douglas's firm is under scrutiny. Several clients have filed complaints about missing funds. It appears your trust fund wasn't the only account he was pillaging. The next day, I received an official notice that my academic scholarship was under review due to concerns about character and truthfulness. Despite Professor Bennett's advocacy, the allegations had reached the highest levels of university administration. I would have to appear before the scholarship committee to defend myself. The stress began taking a physical toll. I couldn't sleep, jumping at every noise. I lost weight. My grades began to suffer despite returning to a stable living situation. One afternoon, I experienced a full-blown panic attack in the campus library, hyperventilating until Jasmine found me and talked me through breathing exercises. Maybe I should just give up, I told her afterward. Drop the legal action. Let them have whatever they want. It's not worth this. That's exactly what they want you to think, she said firmly. They're trying to break you down. It's working, I admitted. That evening, Grandpa found me crying in the guest house. Without a word, he sat beside me and put his arm around my shoulders. I've been thinking about your grandmother, he said after a while. She was the kindest person I ever knew, but she had a backbone of steel. When she believed something was right, nothing could move her. He squeezed my shoulder. You remind me of her. I don't feel very strong right now, I confessed. Strength isn't about not feeling fear or doubt, he replied. It's about feeling those things and moving forward anyway. The next day, Harrison called with news that shocked even him. I've been conducting a more thorough audit of the trust accounts, he explained. Abigail, the $230,000 we initially identified? That was just the beginning. The total amount missing from your trust is closer to $480,000. How is that possible? I gasped. They were more clever than I initially gave them credit for. Douglas set up a complex system of transfers between various accounts. Some of the money went to Heather's trust as well, which they also controlled. What was it all for? I asked, struggling to comprehend such a large sum. Based on what we've traced, Douglas made several high-risk investments that failed spectacularly. Rather than admit the losses, he kept doubling down, using more trust money to try to recover what he'd lost. Harrison paused. There's evidence of gambling debts as well. And your mother's spending on luxury items far exceeds what their legitimate income could support. The revelation was staggering. Nearly $500,000. Enough to have paid for my entire education at any university in the country, with money left over to start my adult life comfortably. All gone. My scholarship hearing was scheduled for the following week. Professor Bennett helped me prepare, along with Dr. Sarah Morgan, a trauma counselor Grandpa had insisted I see to help manage my anxiety and stress. What you're experiencing is a normal response to prolonged betrayal trauma, Dr. Morgan explained during one of our sessions. The people who should have protected you violated your trust in the most fundamental way. I keep asking myself what I did wrong, I admitted. Why they would treat me this way when they clearly care for Heather. This isn't about you, she said gently. Their behavior reflects their own moral failings, not your worth. The night before my hearing, Detective Reynolds called with an urgent update. We've received information that your stepfather plans to bring a doctor to your grandfather's home tomorrow to conduct an evaluation for the competency hearing. But the hearing isn't for another 2 weeks, I said, confused. Exactly. They're trying to catch him off guard. And I'm concerned about what methods they might use to ensure he performs poorly on cognitive tests. We quickly formulated a plan. When Douglas arrived the next morning with a nervous-looking doctor in tow, they found not only Grandpa waiting, but also Harrison, Detective Reynolds, and a court-appointed observer. What's all this? Douglas demanded, his confident facade cracking slightly. Insurance. Grandpa replied calmly. Since you're so concerned about my cognitive health, I thought we should have independent observers for any evaluation. The doctor Douglas had brought looked increasingly uncomfortable. Mr. Hartman, you assured me this was a routine evaluation requested by the family. It is, Douglas insisted. Richard's granddaughter has been isolating him, filling his head with paranoid ideas. such as the idea that my stepson-in-law has been systematically stealing from family trust funds, Grandpa interrupted. That's not paranoia, Douglas. That's documented fact. The doctor excused himself, refusing to participate further. Douglas's plan had backfired spectacularly. As they left, Douglas turned to me with undisguised hatred. This isn't over. You think you're so clever with your little support team? You have no idea what I'm capable of when backed into a corner. His threat hung in the air like poison gas. That night, I barely slept, jumping at every sound. The security system Grandpa had installed beeped with every real or imagined intrusion. By morning, I was exhausted and terrified. My scholarship hearing was at 10 o'clock. Professor Bennett met me outside the administration building. His kind face concerned. "You look terrible," he said bluntly. "Did you sleep at all?" "Not really," I admitted. "Remember, you have the evidence on your side. The committee just needs to see the truth." As we walked into the building, I spotted my mother and Douglas waiting near the hearing room. Somehow, they had learned about the proceedings. My heart sank. "What are they doing here?" I whispered to Professor Bennett. "Trying to intimidate you," he replied quietly. "Don't let them." The hearing was grueling. The committee questioned me for over an hour about my financial situation, the allegations against my character, and the contradictory information they had received. Douglas had apparently submitted a statement claiming I had rejected their financial support out of rebellion, then fabricated my homelessness to manipulate my grandfather. "These bank statements show regular deposits to Miss Mitchell's account," one committee member noted, showing documents Douglas had provided. "Those are forgeries," I explained, presenting the evidence Jasmine had helped me compile. "The account number doesn't even exist at that bank." Slowly, meticulously, Professor Bennett and I dismantled each false claim. We presented documentation of my actual financial situation, work records proving my employment at 2 jobs while maintaining a full course load, and statements from campus security who had occasionally found me sleeping in my car and encouraged me to seek housing assistance. By the end of the hearing, the committee chair looked disturbed. "Miss Mitchell, it appears you have been the victim of a coordinated attempt to discredit you. We will be reinstituting your scholarship immediately, with retroactive payments for the period it was under review." Outside the hearing room, my mother approached, Douglas hovering behind her. "Abby, please," she began. "This has gone far enough. We can still work this out as a family." I looked at her, really looked at her. The woman who had given birth to me. The woman who had known I was sleeping in my car and done nothing. The woman who had helped steal my future. "We're not a family anymore," I said quietly. "We haven't been for a long time." As I walked away, I felt something strange and unexpected. Strength. For the first time since this ordeal began, I wasn't afraid. I was angry, and I was ready to fight back. That evening, I gathered my support team at Grandpa's house. Harrison, Detective Reynolds, Professor Bennett, Jasmine, and Dr. Morgan. It was time to stop reacting and start taking control. "They've tried to destroy my education, my reputation, and possibly harm Grandpa," I began. "I'm done playing defense. I want to know all our options." Harrison outlined the legal avenues. Criminal charges for forgery, fraud, and misappropriation of funds. Civil suits to recover the stolen money. Restraining orders to keep them away from Grandpa and me. "The challenge is evidence," Detective Reynolds added. "We know what they've done, but proving criminal intent beyond reasonable doubt requires solid documentation." Jasmine, who had been quietly working on her laptop, spoke up. "What if we could get them to admit what they've done, on record?" "They're too careful for that," I said. "They've denied everything so far." "Not everything," she countered. "Heather has let things slip. She might do it again if approached correctly." The idea of a sting operation took shape. Heather was the weak link, younger, less experienced at deception, and increasingly conflicted about her parents' actions. If I could get her to talk about what they had done, while recording the conversation, we might get the evidence we needed. Detective Reynolds was hesitant. Recording someone without their knowledge is legally complicated. In some states, it's inadmissible as evidence. Connecticut is a one-party consent state for recordings, Harrison noted. As long as one participant in the conversation, Abigail, consents, it would be legal and admissible. We developed a careful plan. I would reach out to Heather, suggesting I was having second thoughts about pursuing legal action. We would meet somewhere she felt comfortable, and I would wear a recording device provided by Detective Reynolds. The plan was set in motion the next day. I texted Heather, "We need to talk. I'm worried things have gone too far." She responded quickly, "Finally, seeing reason?" Starbucks on campus. 3 p.m. Before the meeting, Detective Reynolds fitted me with a small recording device concealed in a button on my jacket. "Remember, don't directly accuse them of anything," he cautioned. "Ask open-ended questions. Let her do most of the talking." I was nervous as I entered the coffee shop, spotting Heather already seated in a corner booth. She looked tired, the usual smugness absent from her expression. "Thanks for meeting me," I said, sliding into the seat across from her. She shrugged. "Mom and Dad will be relieved you're finally being reasonable. I just want to understand how we got here," I said carefully. "Everything used to be normal. And now Grandpa's talking about criminal charges and prison time. Dad says Grandpa is blowing everything out of proportion. They borrowed some money, but they always intended to pay it back. Almost $500,000 is a lot to borrow without asking," I observed. Heather looked uncomfortable. "It wasn't all at once. It started small, just a few thousand for emergency expenses. Then Dad made some bad investments, and things snowballed." "When did the forgery start? The document with my signature?" She hesitated, then said, "Dad had Mom practice your signature. They needed to adjust the trust terms when Dad's business started having problems." She lowered her voice. "Mom cried about it, but Dad said it was necessary. And letting me become homeless while using my trust fund to pay for your tuition? Was that necessary too?" Her eyes flashed defensively. "I didn't know you were living in your car. They told me you were staying with friends. Besides, they paid for your first year, didn't they? Only because Grandpa was watching closely back then," I countered. "Once they thought he was distracted with his business expansion, they stopped." Heather looked away. "Dad said Grandpa always favored you, that this was just balancing things. By stealing money specifically designated for my education." "It wasn't stealing," she insisted, then caught herself. "It was reallocation." Dad explained how these family trusts are really just tax shelters anyway. The money stays in the family either way. Except it didn't stay in the family, did it? Some went to Dad's failed investments. Some went to Mom's shopping addiction. Some went to your apartment and tuition. She was quiet for a moment. "Things are bad at home, really bad. Dad drinks all day. Mom's on pills half the time. They fight constantly about money. Is that why they're trying to have Grandpa declared incompetent? To get control of his assets too?" Heather's eyes widened slightly. "How did you know about that? You told me, remember? Along with the fact that Mom was researching poisons." She lowered her voice. "Dad says if they can get guardianship of Grandpa, they can fix everything. Undo the trust changes, stop the legal actions. He says it's the only way to avoid prison. And the poison research? I don't know," she admitted, looking genuinely frightened. "I saw it on Mom's laptop. When I asked her about it, she shut the computer and wouldn't talk about it. But Dad keeps saying Grandpa is the only obstacle left." I felt a chill. "They're planning something, aren't they?" Heather looked around nervously, then leaned forward. "Dad has a meeting scheduled with Grandpa tomorrow. He says it's their final offer before things get ugly." She swallowed hard. "Abby, I'm scared. Dad's not. He's not himself anymore. He's desperate." "What time is the meeting?" 2 o'clock, at Grandpa's house. Mom made me promise to stay on campus until evening. Her voice dropped to a whisper. I think that's why she was looking up poisons that don't leave traces. When I reported back to Detective Reynolds and played the recording, he immediately called for surveillance on the house before the meeting. Harrison advised Grandpa to cancel, but he refused. If Douglas is desperate enough to consider harming me, he's desperate enough to try something else, Grandpa reasoned. Better to control the situation than be caught off guard. We prepared carefully. The house was swept for any tampering. Security cameras were checked. 2 plainclothes officers would be positioned as landscapers within intervention distance. Nothing Douglas brought to drink or eat would be consumed. The next day, precisely at 2, Douglas arrived alone. He was shown to Grandpa's study, where I waited with Grandpa and Harrison, much to his obvious displeasure. "This was supposed to be a private conversation," Douglas said stiffly. "There are no more private conversations, Douglas," Grandpa replied. "Not after what you've done." "I came here to offer a solution," Douglas began, setting his briefcase on the desk. "A way to resolve this situation that benefits everyone." "I'm listening," Grandpa said neutrally. Douglas pulled out documents. "I've prepared paperwork to restructure the family holdings. In exchange for dropping all allegations of financial impropriety, Karen and I will relinquish any claims to future distributions from the family trusts." Harrison reviewed the documents quickly, then shook his head. "This is nothing but a complete surrender of Abigail's remaining trust assets to you, with a clause preventing any legal action regarding past misunderstandings." "It's absurd." Douglas's face hardened. "It's the only offer you'll get. Think carefully before you refuse." "Is that a threat, Douglas?" Grandpa asked mildly. "It's a reality check." Douglas leaned forward. "You're an old man, Richard. Accidents happen. Health fails unexpectedly. Are you sure you want to spend your remaining years in ugly legal battles against your own daughter?" The implicit threat hung in the air. Grandpa didn't flinch. "I've lived a good life, Douglas. I'm not afraid to spend my remaining years ensuring justice for my granddaughter." He pushed the papers back across the desk. "The answer is no. You will return every penny you stole, or you will face criminal charges. There is no third option." Douglas's composure finally shattered. "You self-righteous old bastard! Do you think I built my life, my reputation, just to lose everything because of your spoiled granddaughter? I deserve that money. I've put up with Karen's pathetic family for years. You deserve prison," I said quietly. "And that's exactly where you're going." He turned on me, eyes wild with rage. "You? None of this would have happened if you'd just stayed away. Karen was perfectly happy until you started whining about living in your car. Poor little Abby, so hardworking, so deserving." "The truth comes out," Grandpa observed. Douglas reached into his jacket pocket. Detective Reynolds and his partner burst in immediately, having heard everything through the surveillance system. "Hands where we can see them, Mr. Hartman," Detective Reynolds ordered. Douglas froze, then slowly withdrew his hand, revealing not a weapon but a small vial. "It's nothing," he said unconvincingly, "just medication." The vial was confiscated and later tested. It contained a lethal dose of digitalis, a heart poison that could have triggered what would appear to be a natural heart attack in someone of Grandpa's age. Douglas Hartman was arrested on the spot for attempted murder, along with charges of fraud, forgery, and embezzlement. My mother was arrested that same evening as an accomplice. The house of cards had finally collapsed. The aftermath unfolded like a slow-motion explosion. Local news covered the arrests of prominent investment advisor Douglas Hartman and his wife Karen on multiple felony charges. My name was kept out of most reports due to privacy laws, but the university community quickly connected the dots. Douglas, facing overwhelming evidence of both financial crimes and the attempted murder plot, eventually accepted a plea deal: 15 years in prison with no possibility of early parole. The alternative was risking a trial that could have resulted in a life sentence. My mother's situation was more complicated. While she had participated in the financial fraud and forgery, prosecutors couldn't prove she knew about the murder plot. Her lawyer negotiated a plea bargain: 5 years in prison, followed by 5 years of probation, plus restitution of all stolen funds. I visited her once before sentencing, still searching for answers. The county detention center was cold and institutional, a far cry from the luxury she had purchased with stolen money. "Why?" I asked, simply when she was seated across from me in the visitation room. "I was your daughter, your child. How could you let me live in my car while you spent my money?" For the first time, she didn't offer excuses or manipulations. "I was weak," she said, tears streaming down her face. "After your father left, I was terrified of being alone. Douglas made me feel safe, protected. When he started taking money from your trust, I told myself it was temporary. that we'd pay it back before you needed it. And when I did need it, when I called you crying because I couldn't afford rent?" She looked down at her hands. By then, I was trapped. Douglas controlled everything, our finances, our decisions. I was afraid of losing him, afraid of admitting what we'd done. She wiped her eyes. "The worst part is, I knew it was wrong. Every time I bought something with that money, I thought of you. But I kept choosing him. Over and over, I chose him instead of you." Her admission wasn't the dramatic apology I had imagined, but it was something real. Perhaps the first honest thing she'd said to me in years. She had been weak, selfish, and cowardly. She had chosen her husband and comfort over her own daughter's well-being. No grand justification, just human failings magnified by greed and fear. "I don't expect your forgiveness," she said as our visit ended. "I don't deserve it. But I want you to know that I do love you, Abby. I failed you in every way possible. But I do love you." I left without promising to visit again. The wound was still too raw, the betrayal too profound. Perhaps someday we might rebuild some kind of relationship. But that day was not yet on the horizon. Heather's situation was different. As she had no legal responsibility for the trust and had ultimately helped expose her parents' plans, she faced no criminal charges. But her life had been upended nonetheless. Her parents' assets were frozen, her luxurious apartment gone, her carefree college life shattered. I found her sitting alone in the campus cafeteria a week after the arrests, staring blankly at an untouched sandwich. "Can I sit?" I asked. She nodded, not meeting my eyes. "I guess you're happy now. They're going to prison, and everything's ruined." "I'm not happy about any of this," I said truthfully. "I never wanted a family war. I just wanted what was rightfully mine." "I didn't know how bad it was," she said quietly. "About you living in your car. About them stealing so much money. I swear, Abby, I didn't know." "I believe you." And surprisingly, I did. Heather had been a spoiled, entitled teenager who enjoyed being the favorite, but she hadn't orchestrated the fraud or theft. "What will you do now?" She shrugged listlessly. "I don't know. My credit cards are canceled. The apartment is gone. The university is reviewing my financial aid since it was based on forged documents." She looked up, eyes red-rimmed. "I can't believe Dad was going to poison Grandpa. How could he even think of doing that?" "Desperation makes people capable of terrible things," I said, thinking of Dr. Morgan's insights during our therapy sessions. Heather hesitated, then asked, "Do you think Grandpa would help me?" "Not like before. I don't expect luxury, just maybe enough to finish this semester while I figure things out." I considered the question carefully. Grandpa believes in second chances. Talk to him honestly, without the manipulation tactics Mom and Douglas taught you. He might surprise you. A did surprise her. While Grandpa established firm boundaries, no blank checks, no cash handouts. He agreed to pay for her tuition directly to the university and provide a modest stipend for necessities if she maintained passing grades and worked part-time. It was far less than she'd been accustomed to, but it was a fair chance to rebuild her life on honest terms. My own healing process was ongoing. Dr. Morgan helped me work through the complex trauma of family betrayal, homelessness, and the sustained campaign to destroy my life. Some days were harder than others. I still jumped at unexpected noises. I still occasionally hoarded food in my room, a habit developed during my homeless period. But I was moving forward. Grandpa, true to his word, established a new trust fund with the recovered money. Douglas had been forced to liquidate assets to make restitution. This time, the trust had ironclad protections with an independent trustee and clear distribution guidelines. It would ensure my education was fully funded and provide a solid foundation for my post-college life. "Your grandmother would be proud of you," Grandpa told me as we signed the paperwork. "Not just for standing up for yourself, but for how you've handled all of this. With dignity and compassion, even for those who didn't deserve it." By spring semester, I felt strong enough to move out of the guest house and into campus housing. It was my choice this time. A step toward independence rather than a necessity born of desperation. Grandpa understood, though he made me promise to visit for Sunday dinners. Professor Bennett helped me secure a summer internship with a software development company. Jasmine and I remained close friends, bonded by our shared experience fighting against the academic sabotage. The scholarship committee not only reinstated my funding but added a merit increase based on my extraordinary perseverance in the face of personal hardship. On a warm evening in May, I sat on a bench overlooking the campus lake, reflecting on the tumultuous year. From homelessness to legal battles, from betrayal to justice, I had survived it all and emerged stronger. Dr. Morgan had asked me recently about forgiveness. Not for my family's sake, but for my own. Carrying anger and resentment is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die, she had explained. You don't have to reconcile with them or excuse what they did, but finding a way to release that anger will help you move forward. I wasn't quite there yet, but I was working on it. I understood now that my mother's failings weren't a reflection of my worth. Douglas's cruelty and greed weren't my burden to bear. Their choices had nothing to do with who I was and everything to do with their own broken moral compasses. The trust fund would provide financial security, but the true wealth I had gained was in self-knowledge and chosen family. Grandpa, Professor Bennett, Jasmine, Doc Morgan, even Harrison and Detective Reynolds. They had shown me what real support looked like. They had stood by me when my blood relatives had failed spectacularly. As the sun set over the campus, I made a promise to myself. One day, when my education was complete and my career established, I would create a foundation to help students facing homelessness and family abandonment. No one should have to sleep in their car while pursuing an education. No one should face what I had faced alone. The betrayal would always be part of my story, but it would not define me. I was Abigail Mitchell, survivor and future software engineer, granddaughter of Richard Mitchell, and architect of my own destiny. The family that had tried to destroy me had only succeeded in revealing my strength. Sometimes family is what you're born into. Sometimes family is what you build for yourself. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, it's both. What about you? Have you ever had to rebuild trust after a major betrayal? Or have you created a chosen family when your blood relatives let you down? Share your experiences in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell so you never miss a story. Thank you for listening to my journey. And remember, your worth is never determined by how others treat you, only by how you choose to rise above it.